We're back! Toxic Rain Pathfinder is a very fast League start build. It is an attack build, but it scales its damage entirely through gem levels, damage over time, stats, and attack speed, so it functions more like a caster. Because of this, and because Pathfinder has tons of passive flask charge generation, it zooms through the campaign and also through maps. The build can run any League mechanic, it is very well rounded, and has a reasonable amount of damage on a League start budget, but it excels at mechanics that reward speed. So we're talking Heist, Deli Mirrors, and Maven Witnessing. These really stand out as being excellent options. It is a damage over time build, so it handles Expedition really well, too. It's pretty good at Breach, and it should be a solid pick for the Breakable mechanic in patch 3.27. As we mentioned in our last video, we are now working with PoE Vault to bring you written guides for our PoE 1 and PoE 2 builds. These guides will pair with our video content, not for the same level of care and consideration that we give to our YouTube channel. You can find the POB on the written guide linked in the description. So let's get into it, but first subscribe to the channel already. We have been streaming here and on Twitch at Laird Live, so check that out. Join our Discord as well. We've got a really awesome community, and you should come be part of it. Alright, let's talk about some of the basic mechanics of how Toxic Rain and Caustic Arrow work, because those are the two main skills that we are using in this build. So, Toxic Rain is a damage over time skill. Like I said, when you shoot it, it shoots an arrow up into the air. 5 pods will land on the ground, they'll attach vines to enemies that deal damage over time, then they'll explode at the end of their duration. The only thing that matters is that damage over time that they deal. None of the on-hit damage does anything. This is why we really don't care about damage on our weapon. You know, this is a, whatever, like 14 DPS bow or something. You can very easily clear the campaign with a bow that you find in Act 1. We did it, like, last week on stream. You know, very, very, very easy to play this build with no damage at all because all of your damage is coming from your gem levels and your support links. So there are some issues here. Obviously, Toxic Rain, you know, you can see it's not covering a huge amount of space, right? It covers a relatively small area, and you literally can't shoot it off screen. Like, even if I run to the edge of the screen here, I have to actually click where I wanted to shoot. Then we have Caustic Arrow, which kind of fills in a lot of the gaps that Toxic Rain leaves behind. So Toxic Rain is something that you're able to stack a bunch of pods on the ground in a single spot on an enemy. You know, if I'm trying to kill Lily Roth here, I could stack 1,000,000 pods on her, and they would all attach to her and deal damage to her. The same is not true for Caustic Arrow. You could shoot out Caustic Arrow, it will leave a bunch of pools on the ground under enemies, and it also leaves a pool under any enemy that it pierces, so we can take advantage of that, especially early on in the campaign with pierce support, or later on in mapping, you know, good gear with like one source of projectiles pierce an additional target. You shoot a Caustic Arrow into a pack of enemies, and they're going to coat the entire ground with pools of Caustic Arrow damage over time. The issue is, if I were to spam Caustic Arrow onto a pack of enemies, they're only going to take 1 pool's worth of damage. So Caustic Arrow is very good for clearing, Toxic Rain is very good for single target, and we're able to kind of automate them by just using Mana Forged Arrow's support. We do need, you know, some amount of gear to fix some of the mana costs, and what this will do is make it so that when we run around shooting Toxic Rain at rare monsters, things that are somewhat tanky, Caustic Arrow is just going to passively get shot out at enemies and cover the ground with these Caustic Arrow pools that will then kill out all of the small stuff. It also adds a lot of damage as well to bosses and, you know, things that move around a bunch. We're able to add another Mana Forged Arrow support setup with Toxic Rain of Withering, which just makes it so that we could get to 15 Wither stacks pretty much instantly on all enemies, which is like a 90% damage increase. Very good. We can also get Frenzy and Culling Strike out of that, so built-in Frenzy charge generation, Culling Strike, you know, a lot of quality of life just coming out of 2 different Mana Forged Arrow support setups. During the early phases of mapping and also through the campaign, you don't have to use Mana Forged Arrows. You won't have the mana to do it. You can just simply run around using Caustic Arrow on packs of enemies, stuff that you're moving through very quickly, and then spam Toxic Rain underneath bosses and rares, and that'll pretty much take care of everything for you. Alright, that's pretty much it for the offense of the build. That's really kind of all that you have to do. You run around shooting Toxic Rain. If you want to use Vol Caustic Arrow, which I do recommend, you can use that as well, and use that as kind of an offensive cooldown. The same sort of goes with Vol Haste, both just somewhat of offensive cooldowns that you can use. Not mandatory, but again, nice to have. Alright, one quick note about PoB before we actually jump into this. The current version of PoB has not been updated. This is not Local Identity's fault, not a dig on him at all. GGG just haven't given him the whatever JSON required to update POB. Functionally, nothing will change with the build at all when POB is updated from 326 to 327, because the tree isn't changing and none of the skills are changing. There are no changes to the build. You may see a little thing down here that says like, oh, you're on the old trees, go ahead and update. We'll update POB as soon as it is available, so you may not even see that. Anyway, that's that. So with that being said, now let's go ahead and jump into the POB, and we have a very detailed POB here going all the way from Act 1. Every single act is broken down, and as you can see, we have breakdowns all the way through, including like telling you when to go run the different labyrinths and what bonuses to take along the way. We did just do a run through of the campaign with a character using this setup just last week, and it was really, really smooth. So we also have leveling and early in-game and in-game gym setups, all recommendations here with I think a lot of description. I do think it's worth it to go run Act 3 Library and get Flame Dash there. A couple of other like just little bits of like recommendations that I would make are like Clarity. Even if you just run it up to like level 4 or 5 and then leave it there so it doesn't eat up all of your mana, just running a Clarity on, I mean, basically every single character that you run through the campaign just completely solves mana. It feels really good. So like I said, Caustic Arrow is the go-to for the first, well, the entire lifespan of the character, right? But it is going to be your primary skill for the first 11 or 12 levels. You can use Puncture. You'll get that as a quest reward early on, and you can use that for Dweller of the Deep and Brutus. It does help with a little damage there. Other than that, you're pretty much just running around Caustic Arrowing enemies. And once you get Toxic Rain, as soon as you have a couple of different green link setups to use, you can use Toxic Rain and Caustic Arrow, and basically just Toxic Rain for anything single target, Caustic Arrow for anything more like, you know, that you're moving through very quickly. You can kind of try to keep both of them down at the same time too, but eventually your goal is going to be Toxic Rain. It's like your primary skill. Now, as we move closer to the end game and even into the early phases of mapping, we're going to try and make more of an effort to get more Flask-related bonuses, as some of the components of Pathfinder really come online. Master Surgeon, allowing you to have permanent uptime on your life flask. This is a humongous bonus, and you really just want to lean into it, taking things like Careful Conservationist and Profane Chemistry, and especially Flask Mastery. This is a bonus that you won't use long term, but it's very good once you're able to get it kind of early on in mapping, especially as you start to automate your flask usage. This really becomes super powerful. There's a lot of stuff going on that really just helps like solve mana early on as well, like coming over and getting Thrill of Battle is super strong. Getting life and mana on hit, just as 1 point here, can be really, really helpful in the early stages of mapping, or even like late stages of the campaign, just to give yourself like 2 mana per hit. Like with attacks sounds bad, but it counts like every single tap of Toxic Rain on packs of enemies, and the same with Caustic Arrow, so it can actually add up to a lot and really like make it so that you never have to think about your mana flask. Other than that, we're mostly just going to try to build for a combination of like damage over time through things like Wasting and Atrophy, and then defenses, you know, pretty much the standard Evasion Mastery, like, you know, getting suppression from that, from wearing evasion gear, getting suppression. You can use the lucky spell Suppress Mastery if you need it. You know, or not if you don't, depending on your gear. You'll need it at least during the early parts of mapping for sure, but then once you get kind of more established, you won't. Now, there are a lot of aura options that you can use during the campaign, and especially the early phases of mapping. I like to lock in haste from the moment it's available and just keep it forever, because it makes you faster, and speed is kind of king here. But then you have some other options, like kind of somewhat low-level Clarity helps with mana. You can turn on Malevolent. You can basically put Malevolence and Grace in, and then just kind of bounce back and forth between the two of them. Eventually, you will drop Grace entirely, and you'll switch over to Petrified Blood. Petrified Blood, as you can see, like, it puts this little claw over your life pool, and as you use abilities when you're above 50% life, they have an associated life cost with them as well, and you're obviously not able to regenerate life, right? Except through life flasks. And this is where Pathfinder really is like able to kind of step up. Now that I've shot myself below half health, you can see I'm regenerating life very slowly. But Pathfinder is able to maintain 100% life flask uptime, so this is just completely ignored, just like something that you're completely able to override, and actually even turn into somewhat of an advantage by using life tap support. in the primary Caustic Arrow, Mana Forged Arrows link, where this will always be triggering Life Tap all the time, and Life Tap gives you a pretty substantial increase to the amount of life recovery from Flask, 20%, and then you also do get 20% more damage on that Caustic Arrow, which is good. 20% more damage is a pretty solid damage support, in addition to, of course, making all the mana work. Now, in terms of the Ascendancy order, I think, like I said, we've already marked it out here pretty clearly, but the first one that you want to take is Nature's Reprisal. This gives you Withered on hit. This is the one aspect of the hits from Toxic Rain that is important, is that even though they don't do much damage, basically no damage, they do still help you trigger Withered very easily. And then, of course, in terms of the damage increase that this provides, this gives you 50% increased effective Withered. So at full stacks, Withered is a 90% increased chaos damage taken, and with this, it goes up to 135% increased damage taken. So it's a pretty big damage increase. Then the subsequent bonus that you want to take is Nature's Adrenaline. This is just going to give you a ton of flask charges, make it very easy to keep Quicksilver and Silver flasks up while you're running through the rest of the campaign. Master Surgeon's the one you're going to want to take in Act 10, and then in Uberlab, once you're in maps, you'll take Nature's Boon. You'll get that bonus to Magic Utility Flasks. We're talking things like Quicksilver, Silver, any Resistance Flasks or Jade Flask or anything like that you want to use to make yourself tankier and faster and so on. That's pretty much what that is going to provide. Now, one thing I do want to mention is the upcoming league, and I have the Keepers page pulled up here. There is the potential for Bloodline Ascendancies to do something. Of the 3 Ascendancies we've seen, the Wild Bear seems like about the only good bonus, and that's from the Oshabi tree. I don't know that it's worth giving up Nature's Boon. Certainly it's not worth rushing to kill Oshabi to get that bonus, but maybe, once you're fairly geared, if you're using a bunch of unique flasks, this isn't going to do much for them, so potentially you could combine this bonus, the Wild Bear, with the previous 6 points from the Pathfinder tree, and maybe that could wind up being decent since it is rage on hit, and you can get up to 50 rage. It's 50% more attack damage. That does correspond to 50% more Caustic Arrow and Toxic Rain damage, which is pretty strong. Then the other big mechanic that was shown off in this page is the grafts, and most of the bonuses that we've seen are fine. There's kind of a nice thing going on with these grafts where they don't scale with your character's damage, they don't scale with your weapon or any of your damage bonuses, which is good because our weapon doesn't do any damage, basically. It's purely a damage over time bonus, so this will be doing a lot of damage even with a Toxic Rain Pathfinder build, where most things usually don't. But this one really stood out because it gives a massive shield. It's basically like a supercharged version of Molten Shell or Steel Skin. And so if there are other really good defensive bonuses like this, those are probably what you're going to want to keep an eye out for. But, we'll have to kind of get in there and play around and see if there are any that really synergize nicely with chaos damage over time. I'm willing to bet that there are, and that would be pretty cool if so. Maybe we run one offensive and one defensive arm, and then we look super cool. I would love to have 4 arms. Alright, so going back to skills, the eventual in-game goal is to have Toxic Rain on a 6 link with some very powerful bonuses that are giving you a lot of added damage and also gem levels out of Empower. That's really important. Fall Caustic Arrow is better than regular Caustic Arrow if you can get your hands on it, but either of them can work. Mana Forged Arrows, and then again, just a bunch of bonuses that increase the damage that it deals. You don't need Awakened Gems, we have a non-awakened setup in here as well, but that is the eventual end goal, right? You want to do more damage, Awakened Gems are a great way to achieve that. As for auras, eventually you're going to want to drop Grace. For Petrified Blood, you'll just use Haste, Malevolence, and Petrified Blood. And that'll pretty much be that for auras, and it works really well. Petrified Blood does make you immensely tanky. It gives you a basically damage staggering effect, and then Pathfinder's just completely able to ignore the downsides that come with Petrified Blood, preventing life regen. You also can use Immortal Call. You can use this at whatever level you want. I mean, level 1 is also fine, but I like to do this on Automation along with Withering Step, and then Flame Dash and Blink Arrow remove skills. Pretty basic stuff there. As for gear, we have just a very, very, very basic gym, like, gear leveling. You know, you can use literally whatever you're able to find throughout the campaign that has decent links. That's really the only thing that's going to matter. Life resistances are nice. Attack speed on a bow is good if you can get it. Once you move into the end game, you have a couple of options for unique body armor. You can use Kintsugi early on, like very early on, and it'll give you a combination of a ton of evasion and also fire res, and then this like nice little damage reduction bonus if you haven't been hit recently. And the only real downside to it is it doesn't have any life modifiers on it, but you can then take the life mastery that gives you 15% increased life if there are no life mods on it, and that's actually pretty good. So I kind of like Kintsugi for the very beginning of the end game, but then long term the goal is Lightning Coil. It's just a lot more reliable defensively. It converts 50% of physical damage taken from hits into lightning damage, and obviously that's really good. You're an evasion-based build. The biggest weakness you have is physical damage, just getting one shot by stuff that hits you really hard. And being able to convert that damage over is huge. Now, as for your bow, getting a decent bow at the start of the league is going to help you a lot. This is like a very attainable day one bow. It's called a porcupine bow because it is made up of V6 divination cards, the porcupine. These are self-farmable. There are several different zones and maps where they drop deterministically, but you can also just buy them off of Faustus. And there aren't any in stock right now, or I would do that and show you how to do this, but, you know, it's pretty simple. You just hand them in, and then now you have a porcupine bow, but it has no mod, so what you want to do is you want to get some deafening or shrieking essences of dread. Either way, they're literally the same. +2 level of socketed bow gems is the guaranteed modifier they give. And you just want to roll that bow until you get a baseline attack speed roll on it and an empty suffix so that you can craft chaos damage over time multiplier, and that bow will pretty much take you through your first 2 void stones. You'll pretty much just be rocking with that the whole way through. If you are able to get a Quill Rain, that works too. 6-link Quill Rain is going to be more expensive than a porcupine bow, but it'll also carry you big time. You know, those are pretty much the only uniques that you really would want to think about in the first like day of the league. Kintsugi or Lightning Coil, Quill Rain. Porcupine bow's not a unique, but that's an important piece of gear too. Once you get into crafting a thicket bow, that's a little bit more involved, but still not really all that difficult, and that will carry you all the way through Void Stones and Tier 17s and Uber Bosses and so on, and that is basically, it's not the absolute peak of gearing for your bow, but that is definitely a bow that you can use to clear all content in the game. And the only real possible upgrade is like a nice corrupted, perfectly rolled Widow Hail with a perfect double dot multi hunter quiver that you've rolled and spent probably like a billion divines and a lot of stress and sweat trying to craft and get perfect mods on. Other than that, the only unique that you really want to use in this build that is like an equipped piece of gear is the Tides of Time. This is a super valuable belt. It comes from Uber Shaper, and despite the fact that it comes from an Uber boss, it's actually a fairly common drop from him, and it's not really that expensive even early on in the league because there aren't actually that many builds that use it. It gives you increased effective flasks applied to you. It works with unique flasks as well, and it gives you guaranteed life, utility, and mana flask charges, anywhere from 0 to 3. For each of those, you want at least 3 utility flask charges, and ideally 3 life flask charges, so getting good rolls on it might be expensive, but you can just buy a cheap one and divine it yourself, and, you know, maybe you get lucky and you get it very quick, maybe you don't, and it takes you a little bit. 2 life flask charges every 3 seconds can work, but it's a little tighter than getting 3 and 3. Otherwise, most of the rest of the gear that you're going to wear is pretty basic. You're just getting, like, a Despair on hit ring is good, life and resistances and non-channeling mana skill costs on your rings and amulet are important. +1 level of chaos skill gems and dot multi is good on your amulet. Your long-term goal is a +2 neck with some dot multi. That's quite a lot more involved of a craft, but definitely a thing you can do. You can craft up some like move speed and ailment avoidance basic boots. I love those. Other than that, you know, early on in the character's lifespan, you're going to want to get 10% area of effect on both your gloves and your helmet. Those are craftable prefixes, and those are very important. This is very, very important that you get to roughly 40% area of effect. You need between 37 and 43% area of effect. You get 20% from this bow mastery here. And then you can get the other 10% or the other 20% in 2 parts. 10% on your helm and roughly 10% on your gloves, and that will do ya. And you need that so that your Toxic Rain pods will overlap on enemies. Then long term, you can try to get a Progenesis. That's a really great defensive flask. And, really plays to the strength of Pathfinder being able to have 100% uptime on that. And it synergizes very nicely with Petrified Blood. You got 2 different methods of taking damage over time. It can give you a lot of effective health. It really make you very tanky against big hits. Alright, the last little note here is just simply to point out the Pantheon options. So you can take Soul of the Brine King and use that early on through the rest of the campaign and through mapping, and then swap over to Soul of Lunaris once you have ailment immunity. Soul of Rizlatha, you can just start using that immediately upon unlocking it and just use it forever. Life recovery from flasks is great. There are other good options, but I prefer those. As for your bandits, Alira's the best one. It gives you 15% all res. With that being said, I probably would take Rat Boy, what's his name, Creighton, for the 8% move speed, personally, just because I like to go fast. It's kind of up to you. Eventually, the end goal is to trade in an Onyx Amulet and 20 Regret Orbs to get Aramir's extra point, because none of those bonuses are going to be worth +1 skill point once you're deep into maps. Alright, that's Toxic Rain Pathfinder. There is a reason it's our flagship build on this channel. It's fast, it's smooth, it's reliable. We love it, and we will be playing it the whole way through the endgame once again, so there will be updates for the entire process. It's still October, and that means it's still spooky movie recommendation time, and this time we're going with one of my favorite films, 28 Days Later. It's the best zombie movie. Just straight up, it's the best zombie movie. It's so good. 28 weeks later, not so good, and then 28 years later is good again. So I guess check out some of the series, but mostly 28 Days Later is the best. Watch it. There you go. Alright, that's it. Be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and join the Skipping Sleep Studio Discord and become part of our community. And finally, thank you to all of our channel members. If you want to support us so we can keep making more PoE content, become a channel member or come boost the Discord. Thanks for watching. Bye.